What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Gamecite Chronicles, the console gaming podcast where we sit down each and every week to talk about video games. I'm your host, Bonfire, and this is episode number 42. 42 episodes in, man. That's pretty crazy. We've been doing this just about all of 2022, and it's kind of crazy to look back and think about that. But either way, here we are, 42 episodes in. Hope you guys are doing well out there. Had a fantastic weekend. I'm recording on a Friday afternoon. It's actually dry outside for once, and I have a feeling actually that I'm going to lose daylight as we record this podcast. So I'm going to pause for a moment. Video listeners will see. I'm going to turn on my light so you guys can see it. So hold on. That's just bad production preparation on my part. So now, anyways, hopefully as the sun goes down, because it gets dark so early these days, that the lighting in the video isn't as bad as it got towards the end of the episode last week. But I want to thank you guys all for the support lately, and I hope you all enjoyed the recent pickup segment we did last week. I enjoy doing those. I think they're fun, and then I cut it out to a clip, put that on YouTube and Rumble. So check them out there if you're so inclined. If you're an audio listener, want to check out those videos, you can do that. And, we're kind of on the eve of the Game Awards. So this episode will go live just a couple of days before the Game Awards will air. And it's getting time to wrap up 2022. We're going to start, obviously Game of the Year's big conversation. And then what I used to do in my YouTube days is a couple of different like end of the year episodes where we wrap up 22 and then, look ahead at the next year. And I kind of want to bring that to the podcast. So I got a couple of episode ideas that will be coming up. Obviously, we're going to talk about Game of the Year. I'm going to do probably my top 10 list for best games I haven't played. So games that I just didn't get around to playing this year. And so we'll discuss those. And then obviously a most anticipated list for 2023. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a little bit, you kind of probably know some games that will be mentioned, but I think I'm going to make, more of a definitive list. We can share that and just get pumped up and celebrate what happened this year and what's going to happen to the probably absolutely insane next year. Now, for those that are new and uninitiated, remember the best way you can support the show is to leave us a nice rating on the platform that you're listening on. It helps us get into the algorithms, helps people find the show easier. Be sure to share it with your friends if you have some gamer buds that would love to tune in and join our, albeit small but growing community over here at Gamecite. And the episodes of the show go live on YouTube and Rumble, so you can check them out there. And if you do, be sure to subscribe. I'm trying to grow the subscriber base over there with podcasts, with the podcasts and clips and stuff. It's slow going, but either way, here we are. You can follow me on Twitter at Gamesite Podcast, and to catch new episodes of the show, just remember they go live each and every week at Mondays, 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, for this week's show, and for the video list, if you see me look up, my notes are above the camera here, so that's what that is, just in case you're curious. But for this week's show, I wanted to discuss game length because it's kind of, I feel like it's an upcoming topic with one of the games I've been looking forward to, Callisto Protocol, which by the time this podcast comes out, maybe you've already played it if you pre-ordered it digitally, because you get it a couple days early, but it comes out Tuesday, so a day after this episode goes live. But everyone's already playing it right now anyways. And just it kind of sparked an idea, like, let's dive into this topic. So we're going to dive into it, look at a couple different angles, especially around when we talk about game length and value. That's really what I'm going to dive into. And then two small news items that I want to squeeze into the show as well. First, we got to talk about that new Super Mario trailer. Got to talk about that. And then I wasn't going to put this in there. Obviously, this wasn't in here until yesterday because it just broke with some news about Monster Hunter Rise. So I'll touch on that briefly as well, just because it's my constant reminder around Monster Hunter that I really need to get back to that series. So there it is. But before we do any of that, we got to talk about the games that we're playing. And so remember to write into the show, let me know what games you've been playing so we can talk about them, discuss them on the show, and get you all involved. For me, it's been all God of War Ragnarok, baby. That's all I've been playing. And I finally beat the main story. I beat it at around 46-ish hours. So I've put in quite a bit of time since last week because I couldn't put this game down. And I'm gonna go for the platinum because it's actually obtainable and I don't have to like replay the entire game. So I'm still cleaning up a few trophies there. I think I only have a couple left, a couple challenges and a couple bosses to like optional bosses to fight, and then I should have everything I need to get the platinum. So doing that now. I beat it about 46 hours. I'm now at about almost 50 hours because I've been trophy grinding, getting stuff and all that. And wow. What a game. I mean, I really enjoyed this game. Like, really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. And that's one of the reasons why I put so many hours into it in this last week, because I just could not put it down. Like, the story started ramping up and it just totally encapsulated me. And I couldn't stop. It's just fun. And one of the things I love about this game is that obviously outside of the kind of the main linear path and the story that you go through, like kind of like Ghostwire Tokyo encapsulated me. It's got, those collectibles and some of these optional activities to do that or almost like little check the box type activities that I enjoy. And that's what, the reason why it took me so long to beat this game, beat the main story, I should say, is because I spent a lot of time, exploring and trying to get as many collectibles and complete as many, side quests and activities I could in each area before kind of moving on back to the story. And so I really kind of just took my time with it. And quite candidly, I almost didn't want it to end because I was enjoying it so much. And that's very, very rare for me. Like very, very rare. As I take a drink of my delicious protein beverage. So it's awesome though. I like when I finished the game, I was just like, wow, like what a game. And you know, with God of War 2018, I wasn't a father because I had my son, after I played that game. And now playing God of War Ragnarok as a dad, it hits different. And I actually tweeted that out. Like, playing God of War Ragnarok hits different as a dad. And there were some moments in this game where I got emotional. I genuinely I got emotional, and I was moved by some of these moments, and just to see the relationship between Kratos and Atreus, and the amazing performances by both those actors are just so moving. Like, they did an awesome job. And I'm not going to spoil anything as I discuss this, so don't worry about that. I'm not in the business of ruining games for other people. Like, go play this game. It is genuinely worth the price, and uh, just playing it. Like, it's so good. But one thing that was really, really cool is that after you beat the main story and you kind of roll this initial credits, and again, this game is all done in a one shot sequence. So like movies. Oh, my nose itches. So movies like 1917, as an example, which is a really cool movie, that's done in a one shot manner. So it looks like it's done in one shot. Same with this game. It looks and it's all done like it's in one camera shot, one camera angle. And once you kind of roll those initial credits, you can still go out, explore the world, do stuff. And then there's one activity that you do at after that you can do it. And after you do this activity, again, no spoilers, that's when it fades to black and you roll credits. And that's it's amazing. because it beautifully wraps up this really small story part that happens in the game between a couple characters, and it's just beautifully written. It's just beautifully written and beautifully concluded, and the song during the credits is so good, and it's just such a beautiful ending to this fantastic game. And I mean, I've been gushing about this game, but like the voice acting is phenomenal. I think the storytelling and the writing is amazing. I love the way that they threaded in these sub stories. I'm not talking about side quests, but just little, plot threads throughout the game that are interesting and fun and awesome. And they actually kind of tie up those knots, towards the end as you go through the game. And I appreciate that. I like that. Obviously it's beautiful. It runs really well. I only experienced maybe a couple of small minor bugs. On maybe one frame drop or kind of stuttering. So nothing major, if I'm being honest. And the music so good, especially at the end. Like towards the end, as you're getting up to like the final moments of the game, it's building up, and then again those final credits after it fades to black and it rolls. That song is so damn good. Like I think I want to pull it up on see if it's on Spotify because it's so good. It was really really good, and there's so much detail in here. Like just the quality, as I mentioned before, is incredible, and I'm just I'm amazed by this game. Now, I will say I do understand some of the criticisms on this game in the sense that like people complain about the puzzle solving by companions. Totally get that. I truly that should be optional. That should be an option feature that you turn on or off. Like if you need help from your companions. Um I also don't like the fact that there's so many load times hidden by, these crawl spaces or various little areas that you go through to hide loading times. It's pretty clear to me that this game was held back by the PlayStation 4 because they had to develop it for the PlayStation 4 as well, and trying to manage that hardware in this caliber of game. And I also understand the criticisms typical of like almost all PlayStation games that this is just another third person action adventure. I do understand that criticism though. I mean, their games are just so good that I don't know. I do agree that PlayStation needs to kind of spice up their formula and for AAA games from their first party studios, but boy did they hit something special here in the last, I don't know, decade, I guess. But one thing I don't get is some of the criticisms that this is essentially the same game. And I disagree with that because now I will say this, I haven't played God of War 2018 since it originally came out. So take that. But I feel like these games are structured pretty differently. From what I remember of it, God of War 2018 was a little bit more, it's not a full open world, but it's more open, and it's almost Metroidvania in the sense that you can go to areas, but then you come back and with abilities, come back to do stuff. God of War Ragnarok is similar in that sense, the Metroidvania sense, but it was more open, more of an open structure, I felt, compared to God of War Ragnarok. Whereas God of War Ragnarok, I felt like the structure is, you do your mission in whatever you're doing, you do that main story quest, then you come back to a hub location, and then you go out and do another. That it's kind of structured that way. Where, from what I remember of God of War 2018, it wasn't necessarily that way. The Metroidvania components, kind of carried over, but I just felt like the structure is different between these two games. And again, not to spoil anything, there are some different sections of God of War Ragnarok that clearly aren't in God of War 2018. So I don't fully agree with that. I do think these games are different enough, albeit similar combat. They look very similar and all that stuff. So I understand it from that perspective, but it's more than that that makes this game different. And especially like I just go back to like the writing and some of the story arcs that are told. Like, man, yeah. So overall, I enjoyed this game a ton, and wow, I'm excited to get the platinum, and I'm kind of there's a couple of other games. Obviously, Callisto Protocol is coming out that I want to jump into. Though my Amazon, because I got it from Amazon, and it still says it's not coming till a week later, which I'm not happy about. So we'll see about that. But there's also another game on Xbox that dropped on Game Pass. I want to try out Somerville. So, oh, hold on. Whew, okay, sorry about that. My son was napping and he just was totally freaking out, so I had to go check on him, make sure everything was okay. So I apologize about that, but we're back. We're talking God of War. We're talking Callisto Protocol, and then the other game I wanted to play was Somerville. So, and that's a shorter one too, kind of in the same vein of like I think Limbo and Inside. I think actually some of the same people worked on those games too. So, I plan on jumping into that. So I do have a couple games maybe I can kind of squeeze in before my copy of Callisto Protocol comes, but I'm very much looking forward to Callisto Protocol as I've mentioned before. So that's kind of next on the docket, but man, God of War was so good. So good. Now, let's move into a couple of those smaller news items that I mentioned as I refresh my with my palate with my protein drink. Um, so we had two news items I wanted to jump into. First is Nintendo dropped this Super Mario trailer for the Mario movie, and they actually did a direct, and I didn't watch it. Apparently, it was only like 5 minutes, and which is kind of funny. And I think Seth Rogen, who's the voice of Donkey Kong, was on it, and the lady from who's the voice of Peach, I think, was on it as well. But like a 5 minute direct, like come on, dude. But anyway, then they showed off the trailer, and I watched it. I also watched it with my son, which was really cool to do. He was stoked about it, and I have to say, I'm so excited for this movie, man. This looks good. I genuinely think it's good, and this is coming from like a long time lifelong Nintendo fan. But I will say a couple things that I wanted to go through. First off, Mario seems like the comedy relief in this movie, or he's kind of portrayed as like this dumb guy, and it seems like this storyline that he's kind of this dumb, clumsy, dude who will then eventually get his shit together and then go save the world, right? Because he's getting like beat up and he's just very sloppy and all this stuff. So I don't know if I dig that. Still not sure about Chris Pratt as the voice. Like it just doesn't feel right. But I like Peach's voice. I forget the lady who does that, but that seems very fitting. I think that fits. Luigi's voice also sounds very good by I think that Charlie actor. I forget their names. I could probably pull it up, but it's fine. Um, and one of the cool things about this trailer is that it showed off other references to Mario properties that they're bringing into this movie. So they showed off Mario Kart, as they actually showed off Mario driving in a Mario Kart race, and their Rainbow Road was on it too, which was freaking awesome to see that. And then they showed a little Donkey Kong didn't talk, but they showed off Donkey Kong, and that's just in beating he was beating up Mario, and it's just an ode to like the OG Donkey Kong games on like the Atari. Like I used to play those games with my grandmother when I was a kid back in the day. He also does some like I think it's like training or something with Peach, where it's like a 2D level, like a 2D classic Mario level that he's kind of going through, and that beats him up. But it's cool to see those references. Also, Mario being a plumber, partnering up with Luigi, we get to see them finally partners together. And then I also spotted online there's a poster of Luigi that looks very similar, like they're totally playing off Luigi's Mansion because he's like scared, and it just looks exactly like Luigi's Mansion. So it's just an ode to that. So I love seeing all of these references to all these other Mario properties and games and stuff like that that are just they seem to be spot on, like they're very fitting. So I really dug that, and I am excited for this movie, man. Like I said before, I think one of the things I'm most excited about for this movie is being able to take my son to it and watch it and share it with him, because it's taking something from my childhood, playing Super Mario, especially Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo as a little kid, growing up with Mario. Clearly, if you're watching the video, you can see I love I'm an amiibo collector, and I have tons, almost I think tons of amiibos. So I collect those, and just being able to share that love and passion with my son and enjoy, both of us enjoy together this new experience, seeing a Mario movie is awesome, and it's super special to me. So I am super looking forward to this. I think it's coming out April 7th, I think it is, early April if I'm not mistaken. So counting down the weeks to that, cuz I think this will be pretty good. I like what I'm seeing so far, minus some of the criticisms on the Mario character itself. Now, the other news item I wanted to touch on is about Monster Hunter Rise. And this news, again, just broke yesterday. But according to VGC, Video Games Chronicle, the Monster Hunter Rise game, which is currently only available on PC and Switch, is coming to PS5, PS4, Xbox Series X and S, Xbox One, and Windows. I think the Windows launcher next year on January 20th, 2023. And the game is also coming to Game Pass, which is crazy. So, and lastly, the Sunbreak expansion, which launched earlier this year for Switch and PC, I believe, will come out to those consoles on spring of 2023. And then the last thing I saw from Wario64, who's a great follower on Twitter, like really good. He posts a bunch of deals and stuff like that. So check him out if you don't already. But he mentioned that he saw that there was no cross progression or cross play. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But this news I think is really exciting because I think one of the complaints is this for the Switch version is it's fine, it's playable, but it would be much better to play this game at like 60 FPS and just on a better hardware to say. And so now that this, because it's a good game and I've enjoyed what little time I've played with it, but now having it on like modern consoles, like being able to play on your PS5, that sounds awesome. And a smooth frame rate, maybe a little bit better textures. Oh, that's very, very appealing to me, and I like that. And looking at it from Capcom's standpoint, it makes sense. Like Monster Hunter is huge, and it's been huge in Japan for a long, long time. But I think it really broke into the West, kind of the mainstream West, with Monster Hunter World, and now Monster Hunter Rise was really, really good, beloved by a lot of people. So now being able to bring that to a bigger audience and a more wide stream console audience, I think is a great move. And Video Games Chronicle also reported that as of September, Monster Hunter Rise has sold 11.2 million copies, making it Capcom's third best selling game of all time. And that's behind Monster Hunter World and Resident Evil 7, which is absolutely crazy because it's just on the Switch and PC, but it's the third highest selling game of all time for Capcom. That's bananas, dude. That's crazy. And to think like Monster Hunter World is number one, it says at 18.5 million. Resident Evil 7 is 11.3 million. So with this launch on consoles for like the PlayStation Xbox, I'm assuming, even though some of you Xbox folks don't buy games, the PlayStation folks probably will, that this will surpass Resident Evil 7 and be just behind Monster Hunter World in terms of game sales for. Sorry, I was reading something. I was reading something on the article here where it's talking about Sunbreak has already sold 4.4 million copies. But as I was saying, I think it's going to surpass Resident Evil 7 and be behind Monster Hunter World for the second highest selling game from Capcom of all time, which means number 1 and 2, the best selling games from Capcom are Monster Hunter. And so Monster Hunter is now turned into this huge franchise for Capcom. And so it'll be really interesting to see what they do after Rise, because I think a lot of people, given the success of World, want to see them return to that kind of style. Not It's not totally realistic, but a more I guess, modern graphics, realistic graphic style Monster Hunter game available on, the modern platforms. So we'll see what they do, but I was excited to see this news. And the one thing that's disappointing though is that cross progression. The lack of cross progression really sucks. Now, crossplay, it is what it is. I don't that's a really cool feature, and I understand the appeal of it. And I think for a lot of folks that would be really nice to have. Don't and I totally agree with that. But for me, I really wanted to have cross saves because I love I want to be able to take my character and the time I've spent in Monster Hunter Rise over to like the PlayStation version of the game and play it over there where it's obviously, smoother, runs better, and continue over there. And then if I want, maybe take it on the go and bring it back on my Switch and kind of just do this cross saving between like the Switch and PlayStation. That would be so ideal. And I would probably consider picking this game up on the PlayStation if that were the case. But as of now, from what I can tell, that's not the case. And that is a missed opportunity, I think. Okay. So let's get into the main topic of this week's episode around game length and value. And so the reason I wanted, as I mentioned earlier, the reason I wanted to dive into this topic is because the Callisto Protocol has kind of received a little bit of negative sentiment or a little bit of criticism, a little bit of consternation, if you will, around its reported game length. And so, again, by the time this podcast goes up, the game will officially come out to everyone the day after. But a lot of people got early access through a digital pre-order and have already playing the game. Like tons of people are playing it on Twitch already, and but even before that, there was, I think, a full playthrough of the game that went up on Twitch. I didn't look at it, didn't watch it. I don't want to say anything in this game. I want to go in blind. But that went up on Twitch, and then I think an early review or two leaked, and both of these kind of early leaks for the game, it's been reported that the game is around 12 to 14 or 15 hours in length. And for some, I guess that's not worth the price of admission at $70. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen a game kind of receive this type of criticism or concern from gamers. Another example I can think of, a rather famous example, if you will, is the Order 1886. That game I think is famously controversial for being short and being a full priced AAA game. And I find this topic really, really interesting because there's quite a few folks who always complain that the game is short, and there's varying opinions out there and reasons why, game length equals value and all of this stuff. And how I want to approach this is I kind of want to look at a couple different areas around, the value of a game as it relates to video game length, and maybe some outside factors that I think are kind of influencing this discussion or this point of consternation between folks out there. And then towards the end, I'll obviously share my views throughout, but I want to answer the question. I think we all kind of know the answer though. Does game length equal value? I think we all know the answer, but I'll finish by answering that and kind of wrap up my thoughts here. So I want to start off though by talking about the value of a game. And when I say value, I mean the price point, right? Being how much it costs and whether it's the right price point. And I think we all know that ultimately the market will decide what the price point is. So, for example, if a game comes out, not everyone buys it at that price point. That's the market saying, hey, you price this game inappropriately. Now, if a lot of people buy it, maybe you did price it and at a good price point. But again, concerning your costs, it's a balancing act, right? But the way I kind of look at this is there are some objective kind of attributes to or reasons behind the price of a video game, as well as some subjective ones, especially from a consumer standpoint. So with the objective side, and this comes mostly from like the developer side, you obviously have the cost, right? How much it costs to make the game is a huge factor of the value of a video game, or what it should cost in retail for. I think you also have the kind of quality. And when I say quality, I mean, like, is it a AAA game? Is it an indie style game? Maybe a single AA style game? That's certainly indicative of the value and price point. You also have to take into consideration, like, are there any engine fees that you're paying for? So, like, if it's using Unreal Engine 5, they're probably paying some sort of licensing fees to use that engine. Or if they're using other properties, like, let's say Marvel, they're paying licensing fees to use the Marvel property. Again, ties into cost, but in a slightly different way to kind of think about. And then there's the time in development, so how long this game's taken to make. Again, that also is a factor into cost, but another perspective to look at. And then one that I think is interesting is the performance of a game. Does this game run like shit? If it does, it's probably not worth full price. Or is it a run? Does it work as intended? And I think the goal with every game is to hit some sort of minimum viable product, or MVP, when it launches. But we don't always see that, right? I mean, Cyberpunk, hello, anybody? That clearly wasn't up to snuff. And we see it actually with a lot of live service games, especially, or multiplayer focused games, especially when they launch, is that there's a lot of issues with a lot of performance issues, bugs and stuff like that, that really isn't up to snuff from a performance standpoint. And those are objective things that you can look at. Now, on the other side, with subjectivity, this is where length fits in. The length of a video game is absolutely subjective to each individual in terms of is that appropriate for the value. But I also think there's other things, such as, like, the genre. Does the genre fit in with your tastes? Is it something that you actually enjoy playing? Like, I'm not going to go pay $60 for a Madden football game because I don't really enjoy sports games. So that's not really fitting in with my tastes, right? Gameplay. Does the gameplay style, again, fit with your preference, or is it a style of game that you would like and enjoy? Similar with genre, but specifically around the gameplay. So, like a tactics game, right? I'm not super big on tactics games, though I do like them. So maybe that's a factor to consider. And then one of the things I think about, for me personally, around, video games and whether or not I want to, get it at launch, pay full price, etc., is, are there any other games that are coming out around this time that, supersede that in terms of prioritization on games that I want to play? And what games are my backlog, or other games that I'm playing that, may take up time that I really don't need to go buy that brand new game right now? So I think that's something to consider too. And a great example of that for myself personally is The Quarry. That game came out. It was $70 when it came out earlier this year. I think it was around June. And I like supermassive games. I loved Until Dawn. They're one of their prior games. And this game looked like it was going to kind of, back to those roots of Until Dawn. So I was very intrigued, very excited. But there were also a couple other games that I was playing at the moment, and I knew there was, I think, a game or two coming out that I was very interested in, that I felt like, okay, I rather would like to dive into those first before paying full price for this game. So the value to me at $70 compared to some of these other games that I was getting, just, it didn't really fit in from a timing perspective. And that's why I kind of waited for a price drop that felt more appropriate, especially with timing. So that's something I like to consider as well when we talk about, video games from a subjective side. Now, one of the other things that I think plays a big factor into the value of a video game is consumer expectations. And so, does the game meet the customer's expectations? And this is typically set by, marketing, trailers, preview events, demos, etc. And if there's a misalignment between what the consumer is expecting and what the game delivers, then the value of that game is off. It's going to drop, and people aren't going to want to pay for it, or be disappointed and ask for refunds, etc. And that's going to impact the perceived value of the video game. And again, I go back to the Order 1886. I think this is a great example of this, because from the marketing of that game and the way it was kind of positioned and portrayed to us, it didn't really match what was delivered. And I kind of fell into this category as well because it seemed like to me that this game was going to be the next Gears of War game for PlayStation. It was going to be PlayStation's answer to the Gears of War franchise. And so if you think about a Gears game, you're getting what, I don't know, 12, 15 hours, maybe 10 to 15 hours of gameplay or something. Um, and you're going to get heavy action, third person cover shooter, good characters, good story. That's kind of the baseline expectation based on what we're seeing here. However, what we got was really a more quick time focused game. Not as much gameplay, a little bit shorter, well, quite a bit shorter compared to that, I guess. And so those expectations were off. Now, I will say this, I still enjoyed the Order 1886. I enjoyed my time with it. The biggest thing, I'm sad that we're not going to get a sequel because that story ends and it perfectly sets up a sequel. And I think there's an opportunity to go back to that franchise, make a sequel, and deliver on what could have been a really awesome franchise for PlayStation. But I digress there. Oops. Jesus. I'm just all over the place with this episode. Let me tell you, I I thought I was prepared. I'm not. My nose itches unbelievably. So that's why you're seeing me itch it all the time. I don't know what this is like. I don't know. There's something up there. Hitting my microphone. My son was freaking out. Had to step away. I don't know, man. This is just what we get when we're on camera. Since we're trying that out. Oh, by the way, before we continue, let me know what you guys think about the video episodes. If this is something you enjoy, want me to continue, let me know down in the comments. But back to game length and value. One of the other things that I think complicates this topic is this rise of multiplayer and live service games, because the game structures between what we would see in a traditionally single player narrative game is vastly different than a multiplayer game. And those lengths are, you can't compare them. It's apples and oranges. Because multiplayer games, they're open-ended. They're designed that way. They're designed to keep you coming back. They demand constant attention from the player. And folks spend hundreds of hours in these games. And so it's not really fair to have that expectation on all of your single player games and kind of hold them in the same regard when it comes to length. And then you put in price with that, because that's like this muddling factor, because the cost of a lot of these, current modern, multiplayer and free and live service games, they're, a lot of them are free to play. Or, you take like Call of Duty, where I think folks have kind of been trained where you can pay, $60, $70 and get hundreds of hours of content because you can just play multiplayer all the time. So free next to nothing, or you kind of know what you're getting for, I think kind of muddles this customer perception of how much a game should cost and how many hours of value you should be able to extract from that game. And again, I feel like you're comparing apples to oranges when you do that. And as I mentioned before, multiple times on this podcast, games have never been cheaper and more accessible than before. And so not only do you have, these games that are competing for your attention, and people expect to be able to play games for hundreds of hours, games, it's easy to play these games and people have a lot of choices at very, low cost. So, you take Game Pass, for example, you pay that low fee and you get access to all these games where you, within that platform, you can spend hundreds of hours. And then you get a game like Callisto Protocol coming out to say, hey, I'm $70 and you're going to get, maybe 15 hours of enjoyment out of it. I think that players look at it as simplistic as that. And that's where some of this, I guess, anger or negative sentiment is a better term I should use. That's where the negative sentiment, I think, kind of originates. And so it kind of just complicates things. And, there once was a period kind of in the Xbox 360, PS3 days where developers would try to put in reasons for players to retain their games, so they wouldn't trade them in to like a GameStop. And that's we saw lots of DLC packs, map packs, and that eventually turned into what we now know is kind of this live service model where you have this platform and you're kind of monetizing this platform to keep people coming back, because we really don't have to worry about much anymore about trade-ins and stuff like that. It's all about holding that attention, and it works for a lot of people, and you just keep spending money. It's all about that. And so all of that, I think, is a factor into kind of the perception of how much people were willing to pay for a video game, especially when it comes to length. And again, I want to preface that you can't really, you don't want to compare a multiplayer game to a single player game in terms of length and say these are the same, because they're not, or they should be the same, because they're not, and should not be. Now, another interesting angle, as I was thinking about this and kind of doing a little bit of research for the show, is how many people actually complete some of these games. Like, what are the completion rates for these games? And this is interesting, and I think it's lower than you probably think. Now, I went over to PSN Profiles site, which is a website you can go create an account for, and it kind of tracks your trophies. And so I looked up a couple games there, and then I also looked on the Xbox side, just as games I played, because they show like unlock rates, like here's how many people unlocked this trophy, to look at the last beating a game style trophies for a couple of games. And it kind of makes me think about, like, of these people who complain that, like, oh, such and such game is too short, or I don't want to pay $70 for a 10-hour experience, like, but I'd rather pay $70 for a 200-hour experience. Like, how many of those people are actually completing these games? I don't know the answer, but let's go through a couple games to at least paint a picture of a completion rate. So over on PSN Profiles, again, this is PlayStation. We can go to games. And so let's just look up a couple games. We're going to do this in real time. Let's start with Cyberpunk. That's a big game, right? Beloved game, I think, by quite a few folks. So over on the PS4, it says there's about, and again, for the site, you have to register. So this isn't everyone on PlayStation platforms. It's not like scraping or anything. But of the folks that register and have Cyberpunk, we have 140,000 owners and an average completion rate of 27%. It's pretty low. Pretty low. And then let's look up another one, Witcher 3. That's a massive game. Let's look at the PS4 version. This has 540,000 owners, so quite a bit. And it also has a 27% completion rate. That's pretty, so that's, 1 in 4, just over 1 in 4. And then if we go, let's see, Skyrim. That's a classic. And then we can look at the PS3 version, which has 633,000 owners and a 33% completion rate. So 1 in 3 people have beaten Skyrim. Now let's look at a couple smaller games, because it's not all about long games. It's smaller games too. So let's look up Tunic. That's a pretty popular game this year. We'll look at the PS5 version. Only about just under 1,500 owners, so this is not a big sample size at all, but a 55% completion rate for that game. So that's pretty good. I think that's the highest one I've seen on here. Let's look at Limbo. Whoops. Limbo's a great game, smaller game on the PS4. We'll look at that one. That has about 212, almost 213,000 users, and an average completion rate of 17%. That's so low. This game is only 4 hours long, maybe. That's so low that people did not beat this game. That's crazy to me. Just that's bananas. Just bananas to me. And then, just for fun, I looked up Bloodborne because I was curious on that one. That has 840, almost 842,000 users and an average completion rate of 35%. That's pretty crazy. So that's higher than I thought. And then let's take Elden Ring. Let's look at the PS5 version. 84,000 owners here and a 59% completion rate. That's crazy. That's higher than Limbo. Wild. Just wild. Now, again, that's just PlayStation, but I also looked at a couple of my games on the Xbox side, games that I've actually played and beaten, just to look at those achievements to see, because they provide a percentage on there, and I don't know how it's calculated, so I gotta know how accurate this is on the Xbox side. But a couple of trophies for the like game completions or like the final boss type trophies. So on Nobody Saves the World, which that took me, I don't know, 25 hours to beat. The final boss trophy had a 7.76% unlock rate. That's low. That's super low. And then I looked up Assassin's Creed Origins. The final main quest trophy had a 19.35% unlock rate. Again, almost about 1 in 5. Halo Infinite, the beloved Xbox game, completed the main campaign achievement, has a 9.89% unlock rate. That's insane. Now, again, I think a lot of people jumped into the multiplayer on that one, so take that. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, fantastic game. Completed the main story achievement, 27.6%, so a little bit higher on that one. So that's pretty cool. The Outer Worlds, which it's an open world game, an RPG, but kind of on the shorter end, I would say. So complete the game on any difficulty achievement, has a 14.73% unlock rate. So that's a lot smaller than I thought. And then The Witcher 3, because I did play this on Xbox actually. Finished game on any difficulty is a 14.46% unlock rate. So pretty low. Now again, I know this is just anecdotal data points that we're pulling from, Xbox and this PlayStation website. And it's only representative of probably a small percentage of console player base, but some of these sample sizes, at least on with the PSN profile site, were pretty significant. So I do think some of these are fair completion rates to look at based on the sample sizing. So I think it's really, really interesting data, and I think you could potentially make the argument that, hey, maybe some of these games are too long, and that's why people aren't completing them. Now, again, I know there are other factors to why folks don't complete a game. Maybe they got distracted. Maybe they put it down because they didn't like it, or got bored of it. All these other things that people could leave a game for. But I do think it's interesting to kind of take into consideration. So overall, though, the answer is game length does not equal value, but it is a factor. It is a factor, and I think it is something that you should take into consideration for yourself personally. And what I don't want to see is I don't think we should get to a place where we set this arbitrary benchmark for a video game's length that we deem as acceptable for all games, because I think then it'll stifle creativity for the developers, because they have to develop a game that fits into this one particular mold, and I feel like it'll prevent them from telling the stories that they want to make or making the game that they want to, because really it should be, okay, I want to make this game or tell this story, and however long that is, that's how long it is, and that's how it should be. We shouldn't try to go the other way around and work backwards into that and just fit everything into this mold. And I think if you do that, that's where you start to see these bloated games, or this meaningless content, just to keep you playing for X number of hours. And the other thing is that I think we should constantly demand that games respect our time. And if they don't, let them know it, because games that don't respect your time, that's where you see the bloat. That's where you see the meaningless content. Respect our time. We don't need filler and bloated content, because if you think about it, time is an important currency, and time is a currency, not only just video games, but your life, right? You have a limited amount of time here on this earth. And so how you spend it should be worth it. And you should manage that. And games that don't respect that is not a good thing. And so what I think is more important and outweighs the length of a game as a factor is, did you enjoy your time with this game? If you did, that's good. I would much rather spend, you know, 10 hours playing this very dense, impactful game that just moved me a certain way versus maybe 20 to 30 hours of a game where I was bored half the time, just doing fetch quests or something like that. You see the difference there? Now, I want to wrap up by reading someone's response. So I was looking through some forums and I found this beautiful response. So the forum was, am I crazy for seeing long game length as a negative? And for me personally, I don't think so. But this person responded and he made a lot of good points. It's kind of a long response, but it hits on some of the things that we talked about. I think it's beautifully put together and kind of encapsulates a lot of my viewpoints around this as well. So I kind of want to end with this. So it's written from Big Socrates or Socrates. And he says, quote, no, of course not. Game value is just a concept that sounds good as a bullet point for advertising or a back of the box feature. And that's why Dying Light 2, a game that is apparently a reasonable 20 hours in length, was advertised as 500 hours. Executives think that gamers get excited about a game that they can play seemingly forever, and some part of the population might, but many people are turned off by the excessive length. Value isn't defined by how long it takes to beat a game the first time. If a game encourages replay either through things like alternate endings or play styles or just being really fun to play, that adds value. There is also value in the intensity of enjoyment a game has. If you have a ton of fun for 10 hours, that's better than having a moderate amount of fun for 12, and both are better than being bored or annoyed for 20. A lot of people are irritated by the excessive length of many modern games. It may be good for people with more time than money, but since games can be gotten very cheaply these days through a variety of means, and I'm not talking about piracy, but things like Humble Bundles and Game Pass, there are a few gamers that have those issues. Meanwhile, many of the Play Forever games are just variable reward treadmills designed to extract money through microtransactions and aren't actually that fun or interesting. I also get worried when I hear that a game is super long. I've enjoyed some long games, of course, and there are other games I've gotten hundreds of hours to play from where that were mostly enjoyable, including some roguelikes and puzzle games or whatever. But most games don't earn their length. Open world bloat is real, and it's mostly terrible game design. There are some obsessives who enjoy doing the same thing hundreds of times in hundreds slightly different places, but based on achievements and trophies they are given in the vast majority. I think a disproportional number go into game design, and that's part of the problem. I think a lot of people who made Assassin's Creed Valhalla really thought it would be fun to do the same thing over and over and over until players just gave up out of sheer boredom, but most players did not. 16.2% of players got to the end of the main story on Watch Dogs Legions on Xbox. That means the vast majority of players did not want that much content. I bought the gold edition with the DLC and I am in the 16.27%, but I have not gone back to play the DLC missions because I was pretty sick of the game by the time I got to the end of it. And that's without doing a lot of the open world bloat that it offered. Most games are long for most players, and either companies have metrics showing that marketing advantage of claiming a game is very long is good business, or they just think it is for whatever reason. I think a lot of gamers do have eyes bigger than their stomachs and are excited at the idea of putting 100 hours in a game, even if they only end up putting 15 and enjoying 10 of those. End quote. And that, my friends, I think is beautifully said because he hits on a couple of really good points. He talks about that the idea that developers and publishers still think it's a good idea to market your game as the biggest, longest thing ever. Reference Dying Light 2. That's a great example. I think Starfield will be one. Why do we need 1,000 planets? Again, time will tell on that game, but seriously, that is not a good selling point in my opinion. And then he touches on the availability of games being cheap, accessible, Game Pass. Yes, that's a factor here. He talks about bloat in games and time spent in them. Yes, 100%. That's huge. And then he talks about completion rates and how folks just don't really feel the need to put in the time or see the game all the way through. I mean, because they're too big. We talked about that as well. So I just think this beautifully sums up everything that I wanted to convey in probably a much more cohesive and coherent way. So that's why I wanted to read it and give it a shout out. But that's all I have for this episode. Hopefully, my rambling and fuck ups during the podcast aren't too much of a distraction. But I want to thank you all for your time, your love, kindness, and support of the show. Really do appreciate it. Remember to share the show with your friends. Get the message out there. You are my promoters, so I without you, I'm just a weirdo talking to a microphone on the podcast. So thank you guys for that. I really do appreciate it. Remember, leave us nice reviews in the podcast platforms. Go ahead and subscribe over on YouTube and Rumble. Check us out over there to catch clips of the podcast as well as the full podcast episodes. Hope you guys have an awesome week ahead. Next episode, we'll be talking the Game Awards. So I'll probably do some sort of reaction and recap of the Game Awards. We'll dedicate next week's episode to that. I'll try. I think I'm actually going to try to get the episode up early over on Locals for those of you that want to tune in and listen to it there. So locals.com/Gamecite. You can search for me over there and check it out. I think we're going to do that. I'll be sure to tweet it out when I do. And then after that, we're going to start doing wrap up stuff. It's going to be fun. I'm excited. So that'll do it. I will talk to you guys next week. So until next time, I'm Bonfire, and I will see you online.